Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Team Engagement Live session. I'm really excited to have you all here. I'm sure people are still jumping on, so welcome if you're just jumping on while I'm mid-sentence. I'm really excited to be here again, and thank you for joining us. I'm Noelle, I'm the co-founder of Teamgage, and we're a software platform that helps teams continuously improve the way they work together. And we're also really excited with the new launch of our Academy product as well, which is a range of courses and online coaching to help team leaders navigate the leadership of their teams. And I am thrilled today to be joined by the wonderful Julia Steele. Thank you, Julia, for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Noelle. It's great to be back talking to you guys. I love everything about you guys and what you do.
Oh, thank you. Well, for those that don't know Julia, she's very impressive and has a wealth of background, of knowledge and experience. So let me read you her bio. Julia has led change and has been changed, sometimes by choice, but often not. She's a woman of action, a powerhouse of implementation, and all-round expert in getting shit done. After 20 years of bringing teams together to transform companies such as Telstra, Qantas, and AXA, Julia now works with organizations, teams, and individuals to shape their future. She's the author of 2 books, Buy-In, How to Lead Change, Build Commitment and Inspire People, and the second one, Unite. So thanks for joining us, Julia.
Thanks so much, Noelle. Looking forward to this conversation.
So we'll get straight into it because 20 minutes does fly by. So yeah, jumping straight in. Look, I think there's been lots of talk right now about the right balance with hybrid work formats. It's on everyone's mind as we start emerging out of lockdown and back into the office environment. But regardless of where staff are, how do we engage teams in a hybrid experience?
Well, I mean, if you want to talk about change and transformation, I mean, how different do our workplaces look from a couple of years ago? And it doesn't really matter where you are in the world or what industry you're in. We've all experienced some sort of change and disruption, particularly in the way that we work. A lot of people I'm talking to, though, kind of getting really tired and exhausted of how many days, like, are we the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday crew, or are we doing Mondays and Fridays, or are you doing at home, or are you doing sometime in the office? And I don't know about you, but a lot of that conversation is actually getting really, really exhausting, and people actually are ready to move on from that, I think, and get into trying and experimenting with what's working and what's not. So I'm in Melbourne, so we've had the full gamut of lockdowns, and opens up and lockdowns again and opens up again, and every one that comes along we try something else and add something else as well. But I think if we try and get beyond the conversation about, is it Tuesdays and Thursdays, is actually go back to what are we actually trying to do? And we want teams to be engaged, right? We want people to show up as their best selves, as their whole selves. So this work-life balance blurring, we want to embrace some more. And I really think there's something in the engagement conversation which is less about, is not just about what are organizations doing, but how do we individually engage and have the self-awareness about how we individually like to work.
And so do you think then, how do that next step, leaders going beyond talking about hybrid, how do we connect? How do we just get back to wherever we are? Let's connect, let's empower our teams.
Yes, if you look at, there's so much research on engagement. It's like why we're so blessed to work in this space, right? Everyone looks at engagement through so many different lenses. And if you look at sort of the Gallup metrics, there's 70% of disengagement is attributed some way to managers. Mm-hmm. So regardless of what we're trying to do at an organizational level, what platforms we're using, how many days we're talking about, really what engagement is about us and our teams. And I think if we turn a lot of the noise down and actually start to focus on each other, what works for us, what doesn't work for us, what's going to work in a hospital isn't going to work in an office, isn't going to work in a real estate agent, but to actually just focus on what makes us work as a team, then the engagement will come as a result of that. And the other interesting study that I found as well is that this mindset of engagement being an organizational obligation or consideration is actually correct, but also not entirely true. So there was a study done in the US a few years ago that found that actually up to 50% of the reason we're engaged or not is actually us and our personality. So if you've got someone in your team that's open-minded and enthusiastic and has got a bit of get up and go, they're more likely to be engaged regardless of what you do as a leader. So it's how do we marry these two things together?
Yeah,
I think is a really interesting conundrum and experiment for us to look at.
Yeah, that's great. And I think in some ways it's almost relieving as a leader to think, I just need to remind yourself, I just need to get back to connecting with my people in my team and not have my head up here around the logistics of days in and out. And, there's not, I totally agree. There's not sort of one single black and white answer about the best hybrid relationship and days in the office versus not. I think it's exactly what you said, very dependent on the workplace. And so, maybe less focus on the right answer here and just talking to our people and talking to our teams about what's right for them.
Yeah, for sure. And I think as leaders, it's like we kind of feel like we need to be right. And actually a bit of vulnerability, like we've all been so vulnerable and exposed over the last couple of years, even just having conversations like, actually, we don't know. Mm-hmm. We don't know what's going to work or not work for our teams and our people unless we try. And if we're open and honest about those conversations and what we can and can't, rather than trying to command and control, this whole command and control way of managing and setting expectations on people about how things are going to be just closes down so many opportunities for us to actually have meaningful, engaging conversations with our people.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's probably a nice little segue into the next question that I had, which is about senior leadership in an organization and what role do they have around engaging the workplace and the organization, from that senior level.
I think who would want to be a senior leader after the last couple of years? I mean, none of us have had a good run, but to try and deal with everything that's going on and try and keep our organizations afloat and running and adapting, it's been an ask. And just about every senior leader I speak to is exhausted in that level. And so it's not surprising that a lot of us, and I don't want to stereotype because there's completely open-minded people and there's completely closed-minded people on the spectrum of that we're talking about here. But there's a lot of people just like, I just want to get back to some normality. And if that means going back into the office and getting some certainty back, then that's great. But I think what we need to watch for as leaders is making sure that we're checking our own responses against what the expectation is of everyone else. And there's been quite a lot of articles in the media where, CEO of X bank or CEO of Y supermarket has come out and said, this is what we are doing. And it's almost a blanket statement that then sets an expectation for everyone in that organization. And I can guarantee, even before COVID came along, that everyone in that organization had some sort of work preferences, parenting, students, graduates, people on the phones would have a different work preference to people in an office. So I think as leaders, we really need to just watch our own, that we don't project our own expectations onto others without necessarily understanding what they are. Mm-hmm. I think the other thing that people are crying out for at the moment is just some positivity and confidence. And it's been so bumpy. Like in Melbourne, we've been open and everyone was like, yes. And then 2 weeks later, it was like, oh my God, so what can we do as leaders, regardless of whether it's in an office, at home or hybrid? How do we create an environment where that confidence starts to come back? And it might be as simple as encouraging people to embrace what your organization's naturally good at. Start celebrating what we're good at, promoting the progress that we're making. And it might be as simple as getting their input and on what they want to do, and shifting our mindset a little bit and say any progress at the moment is better than none. Mm-hmm. So let's not set our teams up for failure by setting ambitious milestones or ambitious strategies. What's the really practical strategy and vision, or vision and strategy, that people can kind of engage with and start to come out the other side of this last few years.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So is it almost, would it be fair to say it's sort of almost about creating a safe space again in the office, that there's a little bit of stability and safeness, that's not a word, but, you know, safety around what we're doing, where we're at, given how tumultuous the last few years have been?
I mean, if you think about a negative, like if we all just imagine, if you're listening at home, play along. If you imagine the worst team you've ever been part of, right? This is like no engagement, really negative dynamic. You know, there's gossip, there's infighting, there's backstabbing, there's freeloaders and groupthink. Like, imagine that worst team. It doesn't matter whether that team is in an office or at home. People won't want to be part of it.
Yeah.
So if we go, okay, well, how do we create a positive team and start to bring some of that confidence back, so that wherever people work, they want to be part of it? Because I know even people I know that are desperate to get back into the office because they're part of great teams doing great things, and it's not actually about the office at all. They want to be with their peers, and they want to be making the progress that they've longed for the last couple of years.
Yeah, that sounds really good. And I like that. I think that's really helpful to think of our role as leaders is to build, build that confidence. So my next question then, I guess, is that level down. And I mean, we were starting to touch on that there, but as a team leader of a team, so, you know, looking not just at organization, but for those that might be, you know, managing anywhere from sort of 3 to 15, 20 people, what's their role now? You know, it is a new world, and there is, you know, the word hybrid. So what is their role now in terms of leading a team and engaging them?
So I think that they're almost multifaceted, like most management roles. It doesn't matter whether you're in the highest, you know, echelons of an organization or at the coalface. I think we've all got things to learn. Like, we've all learned so much over the last couple of years, and that learning needs to continue as we all navigate what the path out of this is. So if you're used to being hybrid if you're used to being at home, for the last couple of years, chances are your team looks different. You might have had some turnover, and people may have left and come back. People that have used to have been in the office have now moved, you know, regionally, so they're now virtual. So I think the first thing we need to watch is, like, when we go back to the office or we end up in this hybrid world, is don't assume that the team that you had before is the one now. It's like, what worked, what got us here won't get us there, and we need to keep thinking about and testing things. I think the managers of teams and team leaders are the people best placed to have conversations individually about what people need. It's about raising that self-awareness piece that I mentioned earlier. So how do we engage the individuals in our team for them to tell us what is going to keep them engaged? Some people will be quite happy working from home, others won't. Some people will be happy with hybrid. I think the second thing is checking in on how you're showing up. So if I go back to that metric before, the 70% of disengagement is sort of comes from the manager, and that's a really harsh statistic. But if you're having a really shit day, your team's going to have one too. And I'm not saying we should be all, you know, rainbows and unicorns, because we all have terrible days, but multiple terrible days is when you just start to feel the whole team dragging. And if you're fortunate to have, you know, rising stars in your team and people that are interested in experimenting, you know, just maybe, you know, close your mouth and open your ears a little bit more, be willing to try and experiment, and maybe just make sure that because managers and team leaders are the voice, you know, up the chain to the senior leaders that we're talking about before. So it's very easy to sort of say, this is the way it is. It's just what, you know, it is what it is. We just got to go along with it. But we all have an obligation, I think, to be the voice of our teams and make sure that we sharing what's working and what's not working, how people are feeling. So that manager leader conversation sort of should meet in the middle somewhere.
Yeah.
But I'm a big fan of engagement, obviously, but also how do we get back to that positivity and that motivation? And one of my all-time favorite books is Dan Pink's Drive, and he talks about motivation being around purpose, autonomy, and mastery. And if you were to look at your teams, it doesn't matter whether it's 3 people, like you said, or 20 people, are you really clear on where you're going beyond COVID? Are you giving people the autonomy that they need to, try new things and figure out what comes next themselves?
Mm-hmm.
Are you setting them up for success and helping them, learn new things? Or are you doing the opposite? Because no one, none of us, it doesn't matter what level you are, would like to go to work in the opposite of those, where there's no vision and you're being micromanaged and you're not being taught anything. So it's how do we get that positive energy after a couple of exhausting years?
I love that. And you mentioned before, moving away from command and control, and I know we've spoken about this before, but it keeps coming up, and I think it's because it's something that a lot of leaders struggle with, right? We're taught really through our careers that leadership is about control. That is still, I think, a lot of the behaviors we see. So for someone who's trying to go beyond that, and you talked about empowering rather than command and control, what advice do you have for that leader?
I think that there's something about, I'm a big fan of leadership as a coach. Mm-hmm. So if you take your control hat off and put your coach hat on, particularly if you're in that managerial sort of team leader role, is rather than trying to control what's going on as a way of, making sure people do what they should do and, are doing their deliverables in the way that they need to, actually becoming a coach is actually, so rather than checking what's been done and looking backwards, a coach is more forward facing. So what can we do to encourage people to look there? Asking a lot of questions. So command and control is generally a more of a fear-based response. Mm-hmm. And we like to know that things are okay. I was talking to I've got a coaching client at the moment who's a leader, and she said, I need to be across the detail. And I was like, no, you don't need to be across the detail. You need to be across the specifics. They're two different things. Yeah. So how can you coach your team to give you the information that you need? Like, give them the autonomy, give them the mastery, give them a clear reason for giving, and start to turn the tables a little bit on that conversation. But I think, it is challenging. I mean, I remember my first conversation my first lecture at uni was called Decision Making in the Manager. My professor was called Dr. Kim Parker. I'm assuming he's not listening because he's in England, but that'd be quite amusing. But he's at the start of the lecture, he said, who wants to be a leader? And, of course, everyone put their hand up. And he said, right, half of you put your hands down, you're never going to be leaders. I'm like, okay. Of the other half of you, only half of you are going to be great, and only half of you are going to be good leaders. Yeah. And in that sort of a message that stuck with me, what is a good leader? And a good leader used to be command and control, used to be about productivity and effectiveness, and we still need that. Mm-hmm. But now we need the purpose and the goods. We need to be able to be great. Like, it's not that command and control's disappeared. We need to be able to do that, and we need to be able to do the purpose piece, the good piece as well.
Yeah, I love that. I'm just looking. We are pretty much out of time, which is, this 20 minutes goes fast. But
it does. Thank you. Rapid fire.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Julia, for sharing that insight. And I think there were some really good takeaways there. I think, I love what you were saying about, if you want to engage your teams, just go and connect with them, have conversations with them, find out where they're at. That is so powerful. Building confidence, that is our role right now as leaders, is to build a bit of confidence and safety in our team environments. And think about how you're showing up. Sorry, I always like to just summarize some of the key takeaways. So, and there was many more. And for those listening, these will be up on YouTube. So you can follow us on LinkedIn, and we'll be posting out how you can watch these on YouTube if you missed the start or had to drop off at any time. But thank you all so much for listening. And thank you again, Julia. It was great to talk.
Pleasure. Always love talking to you guys.
Bye-bye.